Welcome, weary travelers of the night, to the throne of nightmares. I am your host, the Shadow Weaver, guardian of tales that slither from the cracks in history's forgotten tombs. Tonight, we descend into the shadowed hollows of America's heartland, where the land itself seems to breathe secrets. Our episode, America's Forgotten Children of Inbreeding, a hidden chapter in history. Close your eyes and envision the mist-shrouded peaks of the Appalachian Mountains, where ancient ridges rise like the spines of long, buried beasts, clawing at a sky perpetually bruised with storm clouds. The air hangs heavy with the scent of damp moss and rotting wood, a perpetual twilight clinging to the deep valleys like a shroud. In these isolated pockets of wilderness, time moves differently, slower, more insidious, as if the earth remembers every footstep, every whispered vow, every drop of blood spilled in the name of survival. Here, families once sought refuge from the chaos of the wider world, fleeing wars, famines, and the unyielding march of progress. But isolation, that double-edged blade, breeds its own horrors. What begins as a shield against outsiders twists inward, coiling around bloodlines like a serpent devouring its tail. Love, once pure, turns possessive. Unions meant to bind become chains that warp the very essence of life. Imagine a child emerging from the fog, skin tinted an unnatural blue, like the underbelly of a storm-tossed sea, eyes wide with terrors unspoken, fingers perhaps fused or limbs twisted in ways that defy nature's design. This is no fever dream, no campfire yarn spun to frighten the young. These are the remnants of real bloodlines, hidden chapters etched into America's forgotten narrative, where inbreeding forged not monsters of myth, but fragile souls bearing the scars of ancestral desperation. The mountains whisper their names, the Fugates of Kentucky, the Whittakers of West Virginia, families whose stories blur the line between tragedy and curse. As we embark on this journey, feel the chill seep into your bones, a cold that no fire can banish. For in these forgotten children lies a warning etched in DNA. The past never truly dies, it mutates, lingers in the veins, and waits patiently to claim its due. The wind howls through the hollows, carrying echoes of labored breaths and muffled cries. Lean closer to the flickering light, dear listener, for the night grows hungry, and the shadows are alive with secrets. Let us begin our descent. Picture yourself trudging along a narrow dirt path, overgrown with thorny brambles that snag at your clothes like grasping hands. The canopy overhead is thick, filtering sunlight into sickly green shafts that dance like ghosts on the forest floor. You hear the distant trickle of a creek, its waters stained with the minerals of the earth, perhaps even carrying the faint blue hue of those who bathed in it generations ago. This is Troublesome Creek, a name that drips with foreboding, where the first seeds of this nightmare were sown. In the early 1800s, as America expanded westward, waves of immigrants, Scots, Irish, French Huguenots, and others poured into these rugged lands, seeking fortune or merely escape. But the mountains were unforgiving, swallowing communities whole, isolating them in pockets where roads were little more than animal trails and winters locked families in icy prisons. Marriages happened within sight of one's own cabin, cousins became spouses, siblings sometimes more. It was practical, they said, trust kin over strangers. But beneath the practicality lurked a darker force, the slow unraveling of genetic threads, where recessive traits, once harmless, bloomed into afflictions that haunted the cradle and the grave. Our tale centers on one such lineage, inspired by the whispers of history yet woven with the threads of nightmare. The Holloways, as we'll call them, a fictional veil over real sorrows, began with a man named Martin, a French settler whose blue-tinged blood would paint his descendants in shades of isolation and despair. But before we meet him, consider the atmosphere, the creak of a rocking chair on a sagging porch, the flicker of lantern light revealing faces pale and drawn, eyes reflecting not just the flame but an inner void. The smell of wood smoke mingles with something metallic, like blood on the tongue. These are the sensory chains that bind us to the story, pulling us deeper into the abyss. Why does this tale grip us so? Because it taps into primal fears. The corruption of innocence, the betrayal of blood, the idea that our own heritage might harbor monsters. In a nation built on reinvention, these families remind us that some stains cannot be washed away. They are America's ghosts, blue-skinned specters wandering the hollows, their existence a testament to the perils of turning inward. As we peel back the layers, question your own reflections, what hidden flaws lurk in your family tree. The night is young, and the revelations are many. Stay with me, for the throne of nightmares spares no one. And so, we step through the veil of time, back to the year 1820, when the first threads of this nightmare were spun in the untamed wilderness of eastern Kentucky, near the banks of Troublesome Creek, a waterway whose name would prove all too prophetic. The creek's waters ran cold and clear, but carried a subtle undercurrent of minerals that stained the rocks blue, as if foreshadowing the fate of those who settled its shores. Martin Holloway, a young French orphan, arrived on American soil with little more than the clothes on his back and a worn leather satchel containing a few faded letters from a homeland ravaged by revolution. His past was a blank slate, erased by the Atlantic's unforgiving waves, but unbeknownst to him, his blood harbored a secret, a recessive gene for methemoglobinemia, a disorder that impairs the blood's ability to carry oxygen, turning the skin a ghostly, ethereal blue. Martin was tall and gaunt, with eyes like polished obsidian that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. He wandered into the Appalachian foothills, drawn by tales of cheap land and boundless opportunity, but found instead a landscape of jagged peaks and dense forests that swallowed the sun by midday. Settling in a remote hollow far from the bustling settlements of Lexington or Louisville, he built a crude log cabin with his own hands, the axe bites echoing through the valleys like cries of defiance. The soil was rocky and unforgiving, yielding meager crops of corn and potatoes, while winters brought blizzards that howled like banshees, sealing the hollow in a white tomb. It was in this solitude that Martin met Elizabeth, a woman of Scottish descent whose family had fled the Highland clearances only to exchange one hardship for another in the New World. She was sturdy and resilient, with hair the color of autumn leaves and a gaze that pierced the fog. Their meeting was chance, a shared well in a neighboring valley. But their union was swift, forged in the fires of necessity. In those pioneer days, marriage was less a romance than a pact against the wilderness, two souls barricading themselves against the wolves scratching at the door, the fevers that swept through like invisible reapers, and the loneliness that could drive a person mad. Their first children arrived with the rhythm of the seasons. 7 in all, sturdy boys and girls who helped till the fields and tend the livestock. At first, they seemed healthy, their skin pale but unremarkable under the mountain sun. But as they grew, subtle signs emerged, a faint bluish tint to the lips after exertion, a lethargy that made them prefer the shade of the cabin to the open fields. Neighbors, few and far between, whispered over fences, "The Holloways keep to themselves too much. Ain't natural, that blue around the edges." Martin dismissed it as mountain sickness, a vague ailment blamed on the thin air or tainted water, perhaps even a curse from the native spirits displaced by settler axes. The eldest son, Zachariah, came of age in this bubble of isolation. Tall like his father, but with Elizabeth's fiery temperament, he married his first cousin, Abigail, from Elizabeth's side of the family. Such unions were common in the hollows. Travel was perilous, roads washed out by floods or blocked by fallen trees, and outsiders were viewed with suspicion, carriers of disease, thieves of land, or worse. Trust was reserved for kin, blood binding stronger than any vow. Their wedding was a simple affair, a preacher from a distant holler, a fiddle scratching out tunes under a canopy of stars, and a feast of venison and moonshine that left the guests staggering into the dawn. But with their children came the first true manifestations of the curse. The babies cried with a wheeze, their tiny nails blue as forget-me-nots, and as they toddled, fatigue set in early, their breaths short and labored. One daughter, born in the dead of winter, faded away before her first birthday, her skin turning a deeper sapphire, as if the cold had seeped into her veins. The family buried her on the hillside, a small mound marked by a rough stone overgrown with ivy that seemed to pulse like veins. Zachariah and Abigail pressed on, their grief a silent companion, attributing the loss to God's will or the harsh land. By the mid-1800s, the Holloway family had grown into a tangled web of relations, branches twisting back upon themselves. Zachariah's son, Elijah, wed his sister cousin Miriam in a ceremony held under a blood moon that cast the hollow in crimson hues. The officiant, a wandering preacher with eyes wild from visions, spoke of biblical unions, Abraham and Sarah, Lot's daughters, sanctifying what the outside world might call abomination. Their offspring bore the full mark of the affliction, skin as blue as the deepest river pools, eyes that gleamed with an otherworldly hue, sometimes accompanied by fused fingers or a heart that stuttered like a faulty clock. The children played in the shadows of the forest, their laughter echoing like distant thunder, but their games were shadowed by frailty. One boy, climbing a tree, fell not from clumsiness but from a sudden dizziness, his blue lips gasping. The family adapted, crafting crutches from branches, brewing herbal teas that offered fleeting relief. Elijah, tormented by nightmares where ancestors rose from the earth demanding purity of blood, enforced the family's seclusion. The world out there is poison, he'd rasp, his voice gravelly from years of pipe smoke and unspoken regrets. We stay pure, we stay alive. Under his iron rule, the Holloways expanded their compound, a cluster of log cabins connected by hidden tunnels dug into the soft earth, a labyrinth of dirt walls shored with timbers, where echoes carried secrets like ghosts. Outsiders who strayed too close, hunters or surveyors, were met with stern warnings or, if persistent, vanished into the mists, their fates whispered as accidents. Rumors spread to the valleys below, tales of blue-skinned ghosts haunting the creeks, luring travelers to watery graves with siren songs. One such legend spoke of a peddler who traded cloth and trinkets with the family, only to disappear, his wagon found splintered at the base of a cliff, as if crushed by unseen hands from above. As the Civil War erupted, tearing the nation asunder, the Holloways remained untouched, their isolation a fortress against conscription and raids. But war brings wanderers, deserters, refugees, and one Union soldier, ragged and feverish, stumbled into the hollow seeking shelter. They took him in, feeding him venison stew laced with herbs that clouded his mind and loosened his tongue. In his delirium, he babbled of the children's deformities, not just the blue skin, but webbed toes, whispered madness, and a strength in their small frames that belied their frailty. He escaped under cover of night, or so he claimed in taverns far away, painting the Holloways as demons spawned from incestuous rites, their hollow a portal to hell. Sensing the encroaching world, the family delved deeper into their rituals. Elijah's granddaughter, Lydia, born with the bluest skin of all, emerged as the clan's oracle. Her visions, induced by fever or the family's secret brews, guided marriages. Blood calls to blood. She'd murmur in a voice like rustling leaves, her eyes rolling back to reveal whites veined with blue. Under her influence, unions grew ever closer, siblings to siblings, uncles to nieces, each knot tightening the genetic noose around their necks. The children of these pairings were profoundly changed, some with intellects sharp as thorns, capable of reciting family lineages back to Martin, others reduced to animalistic grunts, their minds fractured like shattered glass underfoot. Yet, amid this darkness, a twisted beauty flourished. The Holloways crafted intricate wood carvings, depicting their lineage as a great oak with roots delving into the underworld, branches heavy with blue fruit. Their music, played on banjos strung with gut and sinew, wailed through the nights, a mournful siren call that warded off intruders and soothed the afflicted. But the cost mounted relentlessly. By the turn of the century, the family numbered in the dozens, but many were infirm, their bodies rebelling against the inbred code, with seizures, blindness, or hearts that failed in youth. Lydia's own child, a boy named Silas, entered the world with a heart that beat too faintly, his skin so blue it seemed translucent, veins mapping rivers of shadow beneath the surface. He survived, but his existence was a fragile thread, a harbinger of the storms to come. As this first part of our narrative fades into the gathering dusk, we leave the Holloways teetering on the cusp of discovery, their secrets bubbling to the surface like a hidden spring poisoned by time. The world outside stirs with progress, railroads snaking through the mountains, towns blooming like fungi after rain. But within the hollow, the blood thickens, the shadows lengthen. What horrors await as the 20th century dawns? The creek murmurs warnings, but the family listens only to their own echoes. The dawn of the 20th century brought the hum of electricity to distant cities, illuminating streets with artificial day, but in the Holloway Hollow, the only light remained the flicker of kerosene lamps, casting long shadows that danced like specters on cabin walls. The air was thick with the scent of pine resin and unwashed bodies, a cloying mix that clung to clothes and skin. Silas Lydia's blue-skinned son grew into a man of quiet ferocity, his weak heart forcing him to move with deliberate slowness, but his mind a labyrinth of inherited memories, flashes of ancestors' sins that haunted his sleep like persistent ghosts. He married his half-sister, Cora, in a ritual deep within the tunnels, where they exchanged rings forged from melted-down family heirlooms, symbols of the unending cycle that bound them. The ceremony was lit by candles dripping wax like blood, the family's grunts and chants echoing off the earth walls. Their children marked the escalation of the curse, each birth a gamble with fate. The eldest, a girl named Elara, emerged with eyes that saw beyond the veil, visions of past Holloways wandering the compound, their translucent forms pleading for release from the blood's grip. Her siblings fared worse, one boy with a spine twisted like gnarled oak roots, forcing him to crawl through life, another whose skin peeled in blue flakes, revealing raw, weeping flesh beneath. The family attributed these afflictions to the mountain's wrath, punishments for disturbing ancient burial grounds or failing to honor the spirits. But Silas, in his quieter moments, knew the truth: their blood had turned toxic, each generation diluting vitality with ever-increasing frailty, recessive genes amplifying into symphonies of suffering. Conflicts brewed as the outside world began to encroach, tendrils of civilization reaching even into the deepest hollows. Loggers, lured by the promise of virgin timber, ventured closer, their axes ringing through the forests like death knells. One fateful night, a crew camped near the hollow's edge, their campfires casting ominous glows that pierced the family's veil of secrecy. Elara, driven by her visions of impending doom, rallied a group of Holloways for a midnight raid. They moved like wraiths through the underbrush, their blue skin blending seamlessly with the moonlit shadows. The loggers awoke to guttural howls and the glint of blades, axes wielded by figures that seemed more apparition than human. By morning, the camp lay abandoned, tools scattered amid bloodied ground, and tales of blue devils spread through the taverns of Hazard and beyond, fueling nightmares in the valleys. But such defenses could not hold indefinitely. In 1925, a doctor named Harlancoin, drawn by the swirling rumors of blue-skinned recluses, trekked into the hollow under the guise of a lost traveler. His true intent was scientific curiosity, armed with medical journals and a satchel of vials. Silas, ever wary but desperate as more children withered away, allowed him entry after days of observation from afar. Coin witnessed the full spectrum of horrors, children with profound intellectual impairments, communicating in barks and gestures that echoed primal beasts, bodies marked by fused limbs, cleft palates, and hearts that fluttered erratically. He diagnosed methemoglobinemia, explaining the blue hue as a blood disorder, and offered methylene blue as a treatment, a simple dye that, when ingested, restored oxygen flow and normalized skin tone, if only temporarily. For a fleeting moment, hope flickered like a candle in the wind. Some Holloways, their blue masks lifted, ventured cautiously into nearby towns for supplies, blending in with the crowds for the first time. Whispers of normalcy spread within the family, dreams of breaking the isolation. But the treatment was ephemeral, fading after hours or days, and with exposure came inevitable scrutiny. Locals, spotting the returning tint or the odd gaits, revived old feuds and superstitions. Inbred freaks, they'd mutter, cursed by their own sins. Tensions boiled over one stormy night in 1932, when a mob of townsfolk, fueled by liquor and law, descended upon the hollow with torches blazing, intent on purging the demonic clan from the mountains. The Holloways fought back with feral intensity, traps sprung from the earth like jaws, arrows whistling from hidden perches in the trees, guttural war cries that chilled the blood. The clash was chaos, flames licking at cabins, gunshots cracking the night, blue figures darting like shadows. Cora fell in the melee, her body riddled with bullets, her last words a rasping curse upon the intruder as blood bubbled blue from her lips. Silas, heartbroken and hardened, dragged her body back into the tunnels, where the family mourned with howls that shook the earth. The mob retreated, nursing wounds and losses, but the victory was Pyrrhic. The hollow was scarred, trust shattered. In the aftermath, Silas enforced stricter unions, as if defying the world through deeper introspection. His descendants intermarried with a vengeance, siblings pairing in secret rites, the gene pool shrinking to a puddle. By the 1950s, the family resembled mere shadows of humanity, some with fused spines that left them bedridden, others with minds trapped in perpetual childhood, babbling incoherently as adults. Haunting events multiplied. Elara's visions turned darkly prophetic, foretelling deaths that unfolded in gruesome detail. A child drowning in the creek, blue body floating like a fallen leaf, another succumbing to a seizure under the blood moon. One infant, born of tripled inbreeding lines, emerged sightless yet navigated the tunnels with eerie precision, seeing, through touch and echo, his fingers tracing walls like reading braille from the earth's veins. The narrative's climax crested in 1972, when a bold journalist named Mark Leiter infiltrated the hollow, posing as a distant relative with tales of shared blood. He documented the remnants, a family dwindled to echoes, living in squalor amid crumbling cabins, their history a faded tapestry of tragedy woven with blue thread. As he delved deeper, guided by Elara's waning visions, he uncovered the deepest secret. A hidden ritual chamber deep in the tunnels, where the Holloways preserved mummified ancestors in alcoves, their desiccated blue skins wrapped in shrouds, believed to guard the bloodline from dilution. In a chilling confrontation lit by flickering torches, Silas's great-grandson, a hulking figure with veins bulging blue beneath translucent skin, confronted him. "We ain't broken, we're pure. The world dilutes souls, we concentrate in." Later escaped with his life and footage, sparking national whispers and investigations. But the Holloways vanished deeper into the mountains, dissolving into legend. Their compound, overgrown and silent, stands as a tomb to isolation's toll, the creek still murmuring their names. To fully grasp the chilling depths of the Holloways saga, we must unearth the real historical soil from which such nightmares sprout, blending documented facts with the eerie folklore that shrouds America's isolated communities. The Appalachians, a vast chain stretching from Georgia to Maine, were peopled in the 18th century by waves of Scots, Irish immigrants fleeing poverty, religious persecution, and land evictions in Europe. These hardy souls carved homesteads from unforgiving terrain, but the mountains' geography, steep ridges, treacherous rivers, and dense forests, created natural barriers, turning settlements into genetic islands where intermarriage was not just common but inevitable. Roads were scarce, travel deadly, marrying a cousin was often the only option, a practice rooted in necessity rather than deviance. Inbreeding, defined as the mating of closely related individuals, amplifies recessive genes, leading to higher risks of disorders like methemoglobinemia, the blue skin condition that afflicted real families. Take the Fugate family of Kentucky, arriving around 1820, much like our fictional Martin. Martin Fugate and his wife Elizabeth both carried the rare recessive gene for methemoglobinemia, which impairs hemoglobin's oxygen binding, causing cyanosis, a blue tint to the skin. In a diverse population, this gene might remain dormant, but in isolated, troublesome creek intermarriages, cousins, uncles amplified it. By the 1960s, over 100 blue fugates existed, their sapphire hues earning them nicknames like blue ghosts in local lore. Dr. Madison Coyne, mirroring our Harlan, treated them with methylene blue injections, temporarily normalizing their color and allowing some to integrate into society. But stigma persisted. Legends spoke of them as cursed by mountain spirits or descendants of escaped slaves mixed with native blood, haunting creeks and luring the unwary. Further north, in West Virginia's odd community, the Whittaker family embodies similar isolation's grim toll. Originating from identical twins Henry and John Whittaker in the late 1800s, their lineage spiraled through sibling and cousin unions. John and Gracie, double first cousins, married and had 15 children, many severely disabled, nonverbal with fused fingers, schizophrenia, heart defects, and facial disfigurements from inbreeding depression. Documented by photographer Mark Leiter in the 2000s, the Whittakers live in a rundown trailer, some grunting for communication, their story going viral on platforms like YouTube and TikTok, blending pity with horror. Public reactions range from charitable GoFundMe campaigns to morbid curiosity, echoing cultural fascination with hillbilly stereotypes. Legends around them whisper of a cursed bloodline. Tragic figures haunting the hills, their afflictions a retribution for defying nature. Culturally, Appalachia became a canvas for such tales during the Gilded Age, when urban writers like Mary Noailles Murphy romanticized, yet demonized, hillbillies as backward and inbred, fueling eugenics movements. The 1913 Kallikak study falsely linked heredity to poverty and feeble-mindedness, justifying forced sterilizations in states like Virginia, where over 7,000 were sterilized by mid-century. Folklore amplified this. The Jackson Whites of New Jersey, alleged inbred descendants of escaped slaves, Hessians and natives rumored to have albinism and deformities, or the Melungeons of Tennessee, mixed race isolates accused of degeneracy and witchcraft, yet facts temper the eerie narrative. Studies show cousin marriage rates in Appalachia hover around 4–5%, similar to global rural areas, driven by economic isolation. Coal mining towns trapped families. The Great Depression deepened poverty, limiting outside unions. Native American tribes on reservations faced parallel issues, with folklore of cursed blood masking colonial traumas. In broader America, inbreeding echoes in religious isolates like the Amish, where high consanguinity leads to disorders like Ellis-Van Creveld syndrome, or Utah Mormons with elevated genetic risks. These stories warn of societal neglect, where fringes are abandoned, blood turning inward like a coiling serpent ready to strike. Blending fact and folklore creates an unsettling authenticity, making these hidden chapters not just history, but haunting echoes that resonate today. Beneath the blue, veined surface of these inbred legacies lies a profound mirror to humanity's darkest recesses, where symbols and psychology intertwine in a dance of dread. Symbolically, inbreeding represents the ultimate taboo, a perversion of the family unit, where the hearth's warmth curdles into a trap, love becoming a cage that warps progeny. In the Holloway's tale, the blue skin transcends genetics. It's a metaphor for otherness, the visible stigma of internal corruption, echoing universal fears of the monstrous child. In folklore, changelings swapped by fairies, or cursed hares doomed to madness. This blue hue, like a mark of Cain, signifies isolation's toll, turning humans into spectral outsiders, forever alienated from the normal world. Psychologically, Freudian lenses reveal inbreeding as repressed desires manifesting in the flesh, the id unchecked by societal superego, leading to ego dissolution in afflicted minds. In Appalachia, cultural trauma from indigenous displacement to industrial exploitation by coal barons fosters a siege mentality, where keeping it in the family becomes a bulwark against erasure. Yet this mirrors broader human nature. Evolutionary biology warns of inbreeding depression, where genetic diversity ensures survival, but tribalism, innate to our species, pulls towards sameness, breeding echo chambers of gene and thought. Studies on populations like the Amish show continuous inbreeding over generations, without decline in effects, highlighting resilience yet vulnerability in closed systems. Thematically, These narratives tap into predestination's terror, fate inscribed in DNA, inescapable as Oedipus's prophecy. The Holloways, like royal dynasties such as the Habsburgs with their infamous jaw, are doomed by blood, their purity quests accelerating ruin. This connects to American cultural traumas, Puritan ideals of pure, lineages clashing with the immigrant melting pot, or eugenics' dark legacy in modern bioethics debates over gene editing. Intellectually ominous, what if our digital isolations, social media silos, polarized communities, our contemporary inbreeding, homogenizing ideas until innovation withers, societies fracturing like brittle bones. These stories reveal humanity's self-destructive capacity, where love, twisted by circumstance, births nightmares. They haunt because they whisper. In every family tree lurks a hidden branch, heavy with forbidden fruit waiting to fall. As the embers of our harrowing tale dim to ash, we are left contemplating the spectral remnants of the Holloways and the very real families like the Fugates and Whittakers, who fade into the mists of history. Their blue-tinned legacies a poignant scar on America's soul. These forgotten children, vessels of inbred sorrow, embody the perils of isolation, where blood's purity becomes its poison, generations paying the price for ancestors' desperate choices. Was their affliction mere biology, a recessive gene's cruel lottery, or a deeper curse, a spectral retribution for humanity's hubris in defying nature's call for diversity? The mountains hold no answers, only echoes that chill the spine. Reflect, dear listener, on the threads that bind us all. In an age of global connection, do we still harbor pockets of inwardness, where ideas or genes stagnate unseen? The night deepens, and with it, the lingering question, what secrets pulse in your own veins, waiting to surface? Until our next descent into the throne of nightmares, may your dreams be merciful, or perhaps revealing. Sleep lightly, for the shadows remember.